It's strange, isn't it? It's just an ordinary word, but the same word was engraved in both our hearts, mine and Alex's. I was surprised to learn that she was thinking the same thing as me. For a moment, there was silence. It was a sweet silence for me. So sweet that I almost stumbled in front of the beautiful woman before me. My name is Alex. I'm 45 years old. I spent 3 years doing medical work near a conflict zone. But I returned to the States last month and will be working as a surgeon again at this general hospital, where I was previously assigned by my university, starting next month. 3 years ago, I took a leap of faith and left the university medical department to work in a conflict zone. When I talked to Dr. Smith, the director, he said he'd like me to work here again when I returned to the States. Taking him up on his offer, I contacted him as soon as I returned, and he told me that there was an opening in the surgery department. So he immediately decided to hire me. Today, I came to the general hospital to greet him and handle some paperwork, but it was lunchtime. Since I had already greeted the general surgery department to which I belonged, I thought I would go around and greet as many departments as possible, starting with the closest one, the orthopedics ward. When I knocked on the orthopedics office door, a male voice said, "Come in," so I entered the room. Inside was a slightly thin man wearing a spotless white coat. "Hello, my name is Alex. I'll be working in the surgery department starting next month." "Nice to meet you." When I greeted him, he said, "Oh, I see. I'm John. I'm quite popular, so the waiting room chairs might be filled with my patients. But nice to meet you." He said this with a smile, and I couldn't help but chuckle a little. Ever since I was interviewed recently, the number of patients has increased. It's been tough. I recently performed a rare surgery that became quite a topic around here. 30 minutes later. "Well, I'll be taking my leave now." I finally managed to say this and left his room. He seems to enjoy talking. Most of it was boasting, but he appears to be a diligent doctor. The cases he mentioned were all rare and could be easily missed without careful study. Although his stories were long and listening to his boasting was tiring, I was excited to have met someone I could learn and grow with. After greeting the other orthopedic doctors, lunchtime was over. I thought about visiting the other departments another day as I walked down the hallway towards the exit. From the other end, a beautiful woman in a white coat, presumably a doctor, was walking towards me. I approached her and spoke up. "Excuse me." The beautiful woman with sharp, defined features stopped. Her name tag read, "Internal Medicine Hannah." As I was about to introduce myself, her eyes widened and she said, "Alex. Right? Have we met somewhere before?" "Yes, my name is Alex." When I said that, she put her hand to her mouth and said, "You're starting here next month? Really? I'm so happy." "Oh. I'm Hannah from Internal Medicine." Alex, you helped me a lot when I was a resident in surgery." "It was a short time. So you probably don't remember." I traced my memory. A faint image of a strong-willed, beautiful woman with sharp features came to mind. "I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but were you the top student at the university? You used to say, 'I'm the top of my class.'" When I said that, she exclaimed loudly, "Ah! Please stop. Why do you remember me like that?" "Well, it's my fault. I was too eager back then." When she said that, I clearly remembered and chuckled. She was very smart and often came to ask questions during her surgical training. It felt more like she was trying to argue rather than just ask questions. When she asked about a surgical procedure and I responded, she'd bring up an alternative technique. "If that technique is feasible, it might be better," I'd reply, and she'd show a satisfied smile. She was competitive and youthful, and I found her very likable. I admired the confidence that came from your hard work. It's an honor to work at the same hospital. I was going around to greet the different departments, but I got held up at orthopedics. I'll come to greet you properly another day." She had a knowing look on her face. "John, right? He talks a lot." She hit the nail on the head, and I laughed. "He sometimes invites me out, but I usually decline because he talks for so long." "If he invites you for drinks, Be prepared for a 3-hour ordeal. With that, she nodded and walked away. John, inviting people out. He's quite proactive. He mentioned he's the same age as me, 45. Hannah is probably about 10 years younger than me. I definitely don't have the courage to ask out such a beautiful woman who's 10 years younger. I left the hospital, thinking about these things. A month later. I had gotten used to working at the hospital, had many patients under my care, and was leading a busy life. Today was my first on-call duty since starting here. At our hospital, there is no dedicated emergency medicine doctor. So one doctor from surgery and one from internal medicine take turns handling the ER. Today's internal medicine doctor was Hannah. Nice to be working with you. I was met with a calm smile, and it made my heart skip a beat. Nice to be working with you. It's been a while since my last on-call shift. I'm a bit nervous. When I said that, she laughed. What's there to be nervous about? With your background. It's amazing. I respect you a lot. I scratched my head at her words. When I went to greet her before, she had asked about my background, so I mentioned my medical work near conflict zones. She was quite interested. Given that many people have negative opinions about that work, I don't usually bring it up. I only talk about it if asked. I understood the negative opinions better once I went there. But I fulfilled my duties properly. I'm proud of that. However, whether it's amazing is another matter. I felt a bit uncomfortable under her admiring gaze and smiled awkwardly. As I was preparing for the shift, John showed up. Hey, Alex, how's your first on-call duty going? I stood up and greeted him. John, I'm a bit nervous, I said with a smile. Upon hearing this, he sat down. I understand. I have some work left, so I'll stay here and do some overtime. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll help out. Feel free to learn from my techniques. With that, he opened his laptop. Hannah then popped her head in. John. He will be fine. You don't need to push yourself. You should go home early. When she said that, he beamed. No, I'm not pushing myself. It's kind of you to worry about me, Hannah. I chuckled at their exchange. She looked a bit exasperated. That look almost made me burst out laughing. She probably realizes his feelings. She seemed to be taking a rather aloof attitude, but it didn't seem to get through. After that, he kept talking nonstop whenever there were no patients. He talked about gaining experience at various hospitals, the latest equipment, and how he often participated in study groups. While talking, he would glance over at the internal medicine area. The internal medicine consultation room was connected at the back, so there was a wall, but voices could be heard. He was speaking a bit louder so that Hannah could hear about his credentials, probably looking for her reaction. Of course, she didn't show up again. Then he lowered his voice and spoke to me. Hannah. She's great, isn't she? I was taken aback by the sudden talk of romance. Well, she is beautiful, I said, and he nodded vigorously. Not just that, she's also very capable. If I were to choose a partner, it would be someone as talented and beautiful as her. Which is why I'm still single. Hannah is exactly my ideal woman. I had thought his standards were high, and now I saw why. Indeed, she might be a rare find. She embodies talent and beauty, I thought. At that moment, a man's loud voice echoed through the quiet waiting room. Please. Help us. Hearing the urgent voice, I stepped out of the consultation room and looked at the waiting area. A man was pushing a woman in a hospital wheelchair towards us, shouting. The woman had a pained expression. Seeing her arms and face, I immediately understood the situation. Burns. I rushed over to them. What happened? The man, in tears, explained. This hospital is near a river, and while barbecuing on the riverbank, she felt the fire wasn't catching well and added some lighter fluid. A small amount splashed, landing on her arms and part of her face. Her consciousness and vitals were stable. I quickly examined the affected areas. The burns on her arms and around her nose were not deep. I checked her mouth and nasal passages to ensure there was no airway burn risk, and determined that I could handle the situation. The small amount of lighter fluid and lack of airway burns were fortunate. However, immediate treatment was crucial. Hey, this is beyond us. The burn area is too large. We don't have emergency medicine specialists or plastic surgeons. The dermatologist only comes once a week from the university. We need to transfer her to an emergency center. John looked in and began to issue instructions. No, we'll handle it here for now, I said firmly, surprising him. What are you talking about? This needs a specialist. If we make a mistake, she could. Ignoring his words, I started preparing for treatment. Hannah stepped in and answered him for me. Alex can handle it. Hearing her support, I focused on the task at hand. Phew. I took a deep breath and headed back to the treatment room. I thoroughly checked the patient's burns again. Burn treatment is a race against time. The burns around her nose were mild, but her arms had extensive second-degree burns, with some deeper spots. To prevent infection, I carefully cleaned the burns, removed any dead tissue, and applied ointment and gauze to protect the area and prevent infection and drying. Because of the extensive burns on her arms, I also administered IV fluids. Afterward, she was transported to a hospital equipped to handle such specialized care. Having finished the task, I returned to the consultation room, but there were no other patients to attend to. John, who had helped with the initial treatment, said, "I'll take care of the on-call duties," and immediately went to attend to the emergency patients. It was a very considerate gesture for him to cover for me with the emergency patients. When I returned, Hannah was the first to acknowledge my efforts. Good job. Her smile bringing me some relief. Next, John looked at me with a puzzled expression. Alex, how are you so proficient at treating burns? And so precisely. Quickly. I went to help, but I soon realized you didn't need me. How did you learn to do that? When he voiced his question, Hannah laughed. He has handled much more challenging cases in much harsher conditions, right? His eyes widened at her words. I was working in medical relief near conflict zones for 3 years, I said, and John looked genuinely astonished. Then, wow. I must apologize for my previous disrespectful attitude. I'm truly ashamed, he said profusely. I panicked. No, it's nothing. I'm still learning myself. When I was about to say that, he strongly objected. No. I deeply respect the medical work you've done under such challenging conditions with limited resources. I struggle with adapting to changes. So I have immense respect for someone who worked in such conditions for 3 years. I chuckled. Thank you. There are many who criticize that work, so your words mean a lot. There were many times I felt like giving up. Since I decided to become a doctor, I had always admired medical relief work in conflict zones. I wanted to use my skills to save as many lives as possible. When I felt confident enough in my medical skills, I left my medical department and headed to the conflict zone. However, reality was far different from my ideals. There were cases where, given enough time and resources, surgeries could save lives. But the lack of supplies and time forced me to make painful decisions. As more lives were lost, the value of each life seemed to diminish. Every day was a race to treat as many patients as possible. There were times I thought about returning to the States after just a few months. But my motto has always been, patient first. I never disregarded the wishes of patients and their families. I always provided the best possible care, considering the future lives of my patients. There were things I couldn't do. But the smiles of patients who recovered were my greatest support. In retrospect, it was a very valuable experience. Over there, I had to handle everything, and burns were very common. The key to burn treatment is speed, cleaning thoroughly, removing necrotic tissue, and preventing infection. This is a small town, and it takes a long time to transport patients to a trauma center. Unfortunately, it's nighttime, so the medical helicopter isn't available. If the patient had been transported without first aid, the necrosis would have progressed during the trip. Even just stopping that was a small victory. John suddenly grabbed my hand firmly, saying, "I'm deeply impressed. I'd love to hear more about your experiences. Please share more stories whenever you have time. I chuckled. No, I'm more interested in current American medical practices. Your stories are fascinating, John. Please share more with me as well. When I said that, Hannah chuckled softly. Alex, you're kind. I'd also love to hear more. Maybe you could find some time for just the two of us? Her words made me blush a bit. John seemed visibly disappointed. I think he needs a woman who can patiently listen to his stories, but that might be a high bar to clear. I thought to myself that a man 10 years older shouldn't take a young, beautiful woman's polite invitation seriously. Yet, she had meticulously arranged everything, including making a reservation at a restaurant. It was an American restaurant with private rooms. Since you were abroad for 3 years, I thought you might appreciate a place like this. I was impressed by her thoughtfulness. Indeed, I had been craving the carefully prepared flavors of American cuisine. But I wouldn't have had the courage to enter such a high-end place alone. Every dish that was brought out was deeply flavorful, and I was moved by each one. Hannah seemed to feel the same, her face showing delight with each bite. Her blissful expression was so beautiful that I couldn't help but look away. After some excellent liquor, Hannah, with flushed cheeks, spoke up. I've always wanted to thank you for your help during my training. If I hadn't met you back then, I might have been a different kind of doctor. She said this with a dreamy expression. Did I do something? I was just doing my job, and I don't think I was able to fully answer all your questions. When I said that, she shook her head slowly. I was quite sharp with others. I thought your gentle demeanor didn't quite fit. But back then, you performed several complex surgeries in one day, and still took the time to explain everything to the patients' families, without showing any signs of fatigue. Initially, I thought it was inefficient to spend so much time explaining things, thinking it would delay your recovery time for the next surgery. But seeing how relieved the families and patients were by your explanations, I realized I was being hasty and short-tempered. I aimed to become a doctor because my parents and teachers suggested it, saying I was smart enough. But my grandmother told me I'd make a kind doctor, which made me happiest. Seeing you reminded me that I wanted to be a kind doctor. She shared this while occasionally sipping beer. I was genuinely touched. Seeing families and patients relieved by my explanations was always the most gratifying part for me too. I was glad she had picked up on my patient-first philosophy by observing me. A thought suddenly crossed my mind. By the way, I think I heard the phrase, patient first, from you. It was a phrase that had supported me during my medical work in conflict zones. She thought for a moment and then smiled. I might have said that. On the last day of training, I was moved by your patient-first approach and might have mentioned it. It's not a particularly unique phrase, so it might not have been me. But I've been working with patient first as my motto ever since that day. So when you mentioned patient first while talking about your work in the conflict zone, I was a bit surprised. Maybe it was true. Maybe I had been carrying her words in my heart. Realizing this made me feel a sudden affection for her. We both had the same words engraved in our hearts all along. Maybe I had drunk too much. Hannah then said, "It's strange, isn't it?" Such an ordinary phrase. But it was engraved in both our hearts, yours and mine. I was further surprised that she had been thinking the same thing. There was a moment of silence. For me, it was a sweet silence. So sweet that I almost stumbled in front of the beautiful woman before me. But she was young, beautiful, and an excellent doctor. She deserved someone better than an older man like me, taking advantage of her momentary admiration. To break the sweet atmosphere, I said, "It's getting late. Thank you for making the reservation at such a lovely place. The food was truly delicious. I'll take care of the bill." I reached for the check, but she grabbed my hand. "Are you going to leave me without letting me say anything?" Her eyes pierced through me sharply. The strong-willed side of her was showing, and she was holding back tears, biting her lip. "I've studied hard to catch up with you, Alex. When I heard you left the university, I was really shocked. But I kept following your example, believing you wouldn't quit being a doctor. When we met again at this hospital, I thought it was fate. Please, let me support you. I was dizzy with emotion. Such a wonderful woman had been thinking of me for years and chasing after me. You're young, beautiful, and an excellent doctor. It would be a waste for you to settle for an older guy like me. I tried to push her away, but she retorted, I'm not just a young, beautiful, and excellent doctor. I'm Hannah, who has always loved you, Alex. I've decided long ago that I want to be with a kind, capable doctor like you. Don't build a wall based on age or appearance. Look at me for who I am. I was defeated. I couldn't push away a woman who cared so deeply for me. Especially not for a reason like me being unworthy. But I had one last thing to say. I'm not good at relationships. My words made her hesitate. I don't want you to support me, I want you to walk beside me. I want us to support each other and live our lives together. When I said that, she pouted at that. But, after chasing you for so many years, I can't imagine walking beside you unless you quit being a doctor. I laughed. What are you talking about? I heard all about how you handled emergencies the other night. I think you're already walking beside me. She shook her head vigorously, and I continued to smile. If anything, people will say, why is such a beautiful woman with such an old guy? I feel the same way. I'm not the kind of guy who deserves to walk beside you. When I said that, she pouted again. There you go again, talking about appearances. I've always kept my feelings in check. I didn't want to fall in love with this young, beautiful woman. I haven't been in a relationship for a long time. So, it might feel like I'm going through rehab. But I'd like to take things slow and build a relationship with you. Her face brightened at my words. She was truly beautiful and lovely. I'm so happy. I finally got through to you. I thought it would take much longer, but I'm so happy. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer, and they began to flow. I still wondered if I was the right person for her, but I wanted to cherish and protect her. Years later, we got married, and now we run a small practice in a rural area, providing medical care to the locals. Hannah's grandmother lived in this area, and after hearing that the local hospital had closed, making it difficult for the residents, we decided to open a clinic here. In this close-knit community, we do what we can with the help of the kind people around us. Today, I got home first and picked up our son from daycare. Living together and supporting each other makes me incredibly happy. I'm home. Sorry, I'm late. Grandma Lynn had a lot to say. Hannah said as she rushed into the living room. Holding our son, she sniffed the air. What's that smell? Did you cook? And you folded the laundry. Thank you. I smiled and said, you're welcome, as I headed to the kitchen to finish preparing dinner. A few years ago, she was the one chasing me. Now, I feel like I'm the one chasing her. Since we started dating, I've been head over heels for her, always wanting to see her happy face. Even now, her smile pierces my heart. After dinner, we took a bath and put our son to bed, watching him sleep. This is my favorite time of day. Hey, am I standing beside you properly? She sometimes asks things like this. Of course. Am I a man worthy of standing beside you? Of course. Now and always, you're my proud husband. We laugh, feeling embarrassed. Every day, we weave this happiness together, walking through a joyful life side by side.